Do sad smo se već susreli s toliko nevjerojatnih sposobnosti naše svijesti, od remote viewinga do placeba. No zašto je koristiti samo za takva ekstremna postignuća, kad je ona uvijek s nama? Ona je mi, kad učimo mi uči i svijest, za koju neki i onako kažu da je izraz sveukupnog znanja. Uroniti u taj bunar svakako se može činiti dobrim alatom, pogotovo kad se ima u vidu da je obrazovanje onaj ključni proces kojim oblikujemo stavove o svijetu oko nas. Ideja obrazovanja utemeljenog na svijesti već se razvija na mnogim mjestima na svijetu. Dr. Ashley Deans, doktor fizike, stručnjak za područje obrazovanja i sveučilišni profesor, također je i ravnatelj prve srednje škole koja se temelji na tim principima. On je ravnatelj srednje škole u Fairfieldu u američkoj državi Iowa, čiji učenici postižu najbolje rezultate u SAD-u. Kakva se tajna krije iza toga uspjeha? Zapravo nitko je niti ne čuva kao tajnu. Riječ je tek o obrazovanju utemeljenom na svijesti, koje neće još dugo ostati ovdje, na rubu znanosti. Sve vas pozdravljam. Dr. Ashley Deans je doktor fizike i stručnjak za područje obrazovanja, te ravnatelj prve srednje škole utemeljene na svijesti. Na brojnim turnejama po svijetu govori o temeljima obrazovanja i o razvoju svijesti, o novim otkrićima i metodama u obrazovanju koje su univerzalne i primjenjive i ovdje i sada. On je također i sveučilišni profesor, već smo rekli da je ravnatelj srednje škole, ali nismo rekli da je to škola s ponajboljim rezultatima u SAD-u, te je također direktor na međunarodnim programima Fondacije David Lynch u SAD-u. Dobar dan.
Dobar dan.
Ova tema znači glasi obrazovanje temeljeno na svijesti. Ljudi po prilici imaju neku predodžbu što obrazovanje jest, ali što svijest jest, to je već malo teže pitanje. U kom kontekstu i u kom obliku bi se mogla taj pojam približiti?
Consciousness-based education is education to unfold the inner genius of every student. What we understand now is that every human being born on Earth is potentially a genius, but education fails to unfold that genius. In Hrvatska, for example, education is like a pyramid, where a few people rise to the top of the pyramid and could be called geniuses. And consciousness-based education inverts the pyramid, so every student can rise to the level of genius. And the way we do that is by developing the total creative potential of every student's consciousness. Now, what do I mean by consciousness? Well, every human being experiences different states of consciousness. So, for example, if you're looking at education, every teacher knows that first thing Monday morning, the students could be in the sleeping state of consciousness. And sleeping is a state of consciousness characterized by no awareness. And then on a Friday afternoon, they could be in the dreaming state of consciousness. They're dreaming of the weekend. Dreaming is also a state of consciousness, rapid eye movements, and illusory awareness. And then you have the waking state of consciousness, where you have awareness of external objects. Now, as we go from the first, second, third states of consciousness, notice how as we go to higher states of consciousness, we're going to higher states of alertness, wakefulness, breadth of comprehension, creativity, intelligence, receptivity. In other words, all of the qualities that make a great student. So what consciousness-based education does, it says, okay, in Hrvatska you're teaching already in good facilities, with good teachers, a good curriculum. No need to change all of that. Just add twice a day for 15 minutes, periods during the school day, when students can develop higher states of consciousness by practicing these very simple, effortless technologies of consciousness, such as transcendental meditation. And when students develop higher states of consciousness, then everything else improves. Their intellect improves. Their memory improves. They become more creative, more intelligent, more productive, better behaved, better citizens. So the whole of education depends, ultimately, on developing higher states of consciousness in the student. And I was thrilled when I heard the word for consciousness in Hrvatski, because It's svi jest, and svi is all, or everything, and jest is that is. So consciousness is everything that is. Everything that is consciousness. And we understand today that there's a very profound link between consciousness and the unified field of modern physics.
Vrlo dobro zapažanje. Evo, trebali smo Amerikanca u studiju da nas podsjeti na značenje korijena riječi koje inače uzima zdravo za gotovo. Kada se na zapadu ili uopće prvi put pojavio taj pojam obrazovanje temeljeno na svijesti? Tko ga je, da kažem, izmislio ili ponovno otkrio?
Well, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi introduced the technology of transcendental meditation into the West in 1959, arriving in America at that time. And he came to America with the technique because he knew that in America scientists would evaluate the technique, and if they found it was beneficial, then being very practical, Americans would apply it. And so for about 10 years, he was encouraging scientists to study transcendental meditation. In 1970, the first paper on transcendental meditation came out in Science magazine. It was published by Dr. Keith Wallace, who at the time was a postdoc at Harvard and had done his research at UCLA. And then, since then, there have been over 600 scientific studies documenting the benefits of transcendental meditation and its advanced techniques for developing the total creative potential of the human being and for developing higher states of consciousness. It was first applied in education back in 1971 with the founding of Maharishi University of Management and Maharishi School of the Age of Enlightenment. And since then, that university and school has flourished, and I'm a professor at the university and I'm executive director of the school. And what we see is quite extraordinary, that the students who are graduating are really expressing that total creative potential in everything that they do. I'll give you one example. At the school, we don't have any entrance requirements. There are no exams in order to get into the school, no tests, and yet our classes consistently score in the top 1% of all of the schools in the United States. When you look at the students' achievements, they've won the American High School Math exam 4 years in a row. They consistently win the state science fair, the history fair, the tennis championships. One of the most amazing feats, I think, is in these international creativity competitions, like Destination Imagination and Odyssey of the Mind, where our school has won the world championships 4 times, which is more than any other school in the world. And people always ask me, where do you find such creative students? Well, I don't. I don't go out and find creative students. We take any student and we teach them this simple technology of transcendental meditation that allows them to dive deep within and experience that field of infinite creativity and intelligence that exists in every human being. Then when they come out of meditation, spontaneously, they're more creative and more productive and more successful. So any school could have these same wonderful results. Any school in Haravatska could introduce just twice a day, for 15 minutes twice a day, a period of quiet time where the students can practice transcendental meditation, their whole creativity and intelligence would increase, and then you'd be graduating brilliant students who could grow up to be geniuses.
Znači, program se u vašoj školi ne razlikuje od drugih programa, odnosno, da kažemo, raspored jednog dana je poprilično nalik kao rasporedima drugih škola, sa izuzetkom meditacije.
Yes, all of our students study physics and mathematics and chemistry and art and literature and do physical education and they do sports and drama. But the essential difference is these 2 periods a day where they can dive deep within. And this is a 4th state of consciousness, by the way, right? Sleeping, dreaming, waking, transcendental consciousness, where the mind settles down within to a state of silent inner wakefulness, and the body experiences a profound level of rest and relaxation. This is different to sleeping, dreaming, or waking. It's a 4th state of consciousness. And what physiologists are saying today is to be successful in life, You have to have regular sleep. You have to have regular periods of dreaming, otherwise life. But you also need regular experience of this fourth state of consciousness. Otherwise, the brain fails to fully develop and the body accumulates stress, which leads to premature aging and stress-related disorders.
Spomenuli ste 600 znanstvenih radova o transcendentalnoj meditaciji i njenim učincima na ljude na razne načine. Koji su to pozitivni učinci koji su izmjereni i kakvi su to bili sve eksperimenti?
Firstly, let's start with the brain. What's been found is that during the practice of transcendental meditation, the whole brain begins to function coherently. The back of the brain, the front of the brain, the left side of the brain, the right side of the brain, the whole brain begins to function in a holistic, coherent way. And this increased coherence has been found to correlate with increased intelligence, increased creativity, improved moral reasoning, decreased depression, anxiety, decreased insomnia, better grades in school, better mind-body coordination. So that's the first point. The second point is that what results from that is increased creativity and intelligence. So at schools these days, you take in a group of students, but the students going out, their ability depends very greatly on the ability of the students coming in. Whereas in consciousness-based education, take in any student and graduate a creative and intelligent student. Reduce stress and anxiety, which also correlates with decreased hospital admission rates, decreased disease rates, better moral reasoning, which corresponds with reduced crime and bullying and violence. And then also we see a creation of peace in society, which we can talk about later. So these are holistically the benefits that have been found in the scientific literature.
Kako se u vašoj školi učenici nose s onim što mi se čini da je jedan od većih problema u svakodnevnici hrvatskih đaka i učenika, a to je ogromna količina gradiva koja se svake godine povećava. Već 10-20 godina se uvijek priča o smanjenju gradiva, torbe trebaju biti lakše, međutim torbe postaju sve teže, gradiva je sve više, podataka i činjenica je sve više, one ulaze u glavu jednako brzo kao što i izlaze iz nje. I naravno tu su prisutni stresovi i zbog državne mature, i zbog prijemnih ispita, i zbog svakodnevnih ispita u školi, to jest svakotjednih i svakomjesečnih. Na koji način je u školi, je li vaša škola lišena tih testova i te ogromne količine činjenica koje, eto, bombardiraju učenike sa svih strana?
Yes and no, and I'll tell you why. Obviously, students still have to know things. You still have to be able to do mathematics and be able to read and all of that. But the great misunderstanding in education today that is really very detrimental to students is that today's education is, we could call, fact-based or information-based. Teachers are trying to cram in a lot of information into the student. Now think for a moment. There are three fundamental components of education. There's the knower, the student, the process of knowing, and then there's the known. And as you are pointing out, there's an infinite amount of known. The question is, how much of the totality of knowledge does any one student actually know? The answer is very little. Even if you go on and take a PhD, you'll find that you learn more and more and more about less and less and less. So by the time you get a PhD, you know almost everything about almost nothing. You know a tiny fraction of the totality of knowledge. That's a big problem, and that actually is the basis of the stress. Because if you think about it, the most fundamental desire that every child is born with is the desire to want to know everything. If you don't believe me, just go and look at a kindergarten class. What do you see? 6-year-olds who are into everything. They never stop asking questions. By the time the students are 18, half of those students who wanted to know everything are now dropping out of education. Why? Because that desire to know everything is not fulfilled by education. However high you go in education, you still don't have that feeling of knowing the totality of knowledge. But today we understand that it is possible to gain total knowledge in a very short time. It would take you an infinite number of lifetimes to gain total knowledge by studying physics and chemistry and mathematics and art and philosophy. But the source of total knowledge can be gained in short time. Today we understand that there is a source of total knowledge in the universe. It's called the unified field. What's happened over the last 500 years is that physicists ask that question. What is the nature of the what is the nature of the universe in which we live? What they see on the surface is infinite diversity. You look different to me, and I look different to the glass of water, which is fortunate for me, and the table and the stars and the galaxies, infinite diversity. But as physicists have probed to finer levels of material existence, they've found that all the forces and particles of nature become progressively more unified, culminating today in the discovery of completely unified field theories. So one single unified field interacts with itself, vibrates within itself, creates electrons, protons, atoms, molecules, human beings, glasses of water, stars, galaxies. Everything in the universe is an expression of that one single unified field. Now, that unified field is the source of our DNA. It is the source of our physiology. But by definition, it is the source of everything. So therefore must also be the source of our consciousness. And what the Transcendental Meditation technique allows us to do is to start out on the surface thinking level of the mind, that level of diversity, different thoughts, thought about this, about that, about this, experiencing a thought at finer and finer levels of the thought, transcending the subtlest impulse of thought, and experiencing that field of pure, silent, unbounded awareness at the source of thought. That experience of the source of thought is the experience of the source of total knowledge. How could I say that? Because think for a moment. If you wanted total knowledge, what are your options? You can keep studying, book after book after book. You can go down to the library. You can try to read every single book in the library, but you'll just get depressed. You can't read 10 million books. But where does a book come from? You know, a book comes from a printer, which comes from a word processor, which has a keyboard, which is activated by the fingers of an author. And what are the fingers of the author doing? They're setting down the thoughts in the mind of the author. Every book in the library originated as human thought. So if the library contains total knowledge, and all that knowledge arose originally as thought, then the source of thought is the field of total knowledge. And we understand today that the source of human thought is the unified field, the source of the total knowledge and organizing power of the whole entire universe. So when you give the student, just very briefly, 15 minutes twice a day, the experience of the source of their creative potential, which is the source of total knowledge of the whole universe, then everything they learn in school is always connected to the source of total knowledge. They're never lost in the parts, never wondering, oh, why am I studying this? What does this have to do with this? What does this have to do with this? Always connected to the source of total knowledge. And gaining total knowledge is easy. It's like a tree. If you have an infinitely complicated tree, yes, you could spend lifetimes studying the bark and the leaves and the fruits and the seeds, but you can hold the seed in the palm of your hand. The seed contains the total knowledge of the tree. If you know the seed, you know the whole tree. It's the same with the unified field. When you have the experience of the unified field, you know the source of total knowledge of the whole universe. Then the student is fulfilled. Then they feel, yes, I am that field of total knowledge, and I can express it in physics and mathematics and sociology. So this brings fulfillment to students and takes away that fundamental stress of not knowing everything, which is what they started life out wanting to know. And at the same time, of course, dissolving the stress from the physiology that's already built up. So they gain on both fronts. It relieves the stress and pressure, and it also refines the physiology and develops higher states of consciousness. So our students, they excel in academics, but you'll notice when you come and visit the school, no stress. No stress. Because what is there to get stressed about when you're fulfilled and you're becoming so creative that any normal exam is easy?
Kakav je njihov odnos prema činjenicama koje treba usvojiti? Godinama, veličinama, brojkama, vrstama životinja, oblicima crijeva, brojevima kralježaka i slično, što je ono što zapravo predstavlja često puta problem i zahtjeva štrebanje i štrebanje i štrebanje.
Well, what's happened here is that it's very easy to explain this. We know that everything you do changes your brain. So if you take violin lessons, for example, if I do a brain scan of you today, and then I send you out for violin lessons, and you play the violin for 2 months, and then I do a brain scan again, you'll find the area of the brain responsible for moving the fingers of the left hand has formed millions of new neuronal connections compared to the area that moves the fingers of the right hand. If you go to a mathematics class, that will develop a certain style of brain functioning. If you go to art class, that develops another style of brain functioning. But this fragmented approach to knowledge results in fragmented brain development. Nothing is offered in education today to develop the whole brain. But if fragmented knowledge results in fragmented brain development, could it be that the experience of this unified field of total knowledge within results in total brain development? That's exactly what the neurophysiologists have found, that this experience of transcending, this experience of pure consciousness, the unified field within, develops the whole brain. So therefore, as our students go through the school, their brain is becoming more integrated. Their memory is improving. Their hippocampus becomes more enlivened. Their creativity is getting better. Their memory is getting better. So when they have to take some knowledge, learning facts, when your brain is more clearly functioning and your brain is functioning in a more efficient way, then learning a few facts is easy. The problem is when your brain is not functioning properly. If you're in the sleeping state of consciousness, you can't learn any facts. If you're in the dreaming state of consciousness, you'll learn the wrong facts. If you're in the waking state of consciousness, you'll learn a limited number of facts. But when you're in higher states of consciousness, learning facts is easy. And remember one other important thing, that the facts that you learn in school are going to be out of date by the time you graduate. If you're learning a computer program today, by the time you graduate, it'll be redundant. It'll be obsolete. What you really need from education is not a piece of paper that says you've learnt all these facts. What you need is a brain. If you graduate with a fully developed brain, then you can adapt to any changing situation and learn facts as fast as you like. That's what education should be doing. Developing higher states of consciousness, which we can define as developing the total creative potential of the brain, and then everything becomes possible. I mean, think of the economy, right? You may think, oh, I wish we had a better economy in Hrvatska. Now, what's the most fundamental impulse of a good, successful economy? It's individuals who have highly creative ideas and the organizing power to fulfill those ideas. Just think of Steve Jobs. He had an idea in his garage. I'm going to start Apple Computer. He's made a huge economy. Bill Gates had an idea. Oh, I'm going to develop some software. Developed a huge economy. The founders of Google, they had an idea. Let's start a search engine company. They're hugely wealthy, employing thousands of people. You only need to have citizens who are able to experience the source of all creativity to be able to transform an economy virtually overnight. It all depends on the creativity of the brains of the 4.2 million citizens of Hrvatska. That's the key to creating a successful, productive, harmonious society.
Spominjali ste mozak i povezivanje lijeve i desne polutke. Transcendentalna meditacija na zapadu je naravno bila nešto novo prije par desetljeća, međutim njeno podrijetlo je vrlo staro, mjeri se u tisućama, ako ne i u više tisuća godina, i povezuje se sa tehnologijom koja u sebi sadrži sutre koje su u stvari nekakve formule vibracijske koje potiču ovaj ili onaj dio mozga i slično. Da li je suvremena znanost kroz neke brojke i analogije potvrdila drevna znanja poput Patnađalijevih sutri možda po njihovoj količini, ili da li se ti opisi poklapaju danas?
Yes, it completely works because this is not mysticism. It's just as physics is a science of material existence, then the science and technology of consciousness is the science of subjective existence. And ultimately, at their basis, objective and subjective existence are unified together in the unified field. So when Maharishi Mahesh Yogi started teaching transcendental meditation, he emphasized one thing, and that is that for thousands of years, meditation has been badly misunderstood. People thought that meditation, firstly, was mystical. They thought it wasn't practical. They thought it involved arduous concentration, which they'd never be able to do. Those that did arduous concentration, they had to withdraw from society. It wasn't practical. And the other type of meditation was contemplation, thinking about things, thinking about the ocean or mountains or spirituality. But again, that leaves the mind on the surface level. So Maharishi pointed out that the oldest tradition of meditation, the Vedic tradition of India, says that meditation is actually effortless, completely effortless, completely natural, so that now in schools little children can meditate easily, and they enjoy doing it. You don't have to be good at anything to be able to meditate. Anyone could do transcendental meditation. So he pointed out that transcendental meditation was for everyone. And then when the scientists began to look at the effects, they found, firstly with transcendental meditation, that the whole brain begins to function coherently, that the left side becomes coherent with the right side, that it enlivens the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for higher human values. That's the difference between a human being and an animal. A human being has a more highly developed prefrontal cortex and association fibers that link the prefrontal cortex to the rest of the brain. In fact, the back of the brain is often referred to as the animal brain. The great tragedy of education over the last few thousand years has been that it fails to develop the whole brain. So you end up with human beings who behave more like animals than human beings are supposed to behave like. You get humans who are inhumane when education doesn't develop the whole brain. This is a very exciting discovery, very exciting, that the experience of the field of total knowledge within develops total brain functioning. At the same time, the body experiences this deep level of rest and relaxation, and that allows the body to dissolve deeply rooted stress and fatigue that is not released during sleep. The result of that is a dramatic reduction in stress-related disorders. If you think of the major killers in our society today, cancer, heart disease, breakdown in the immune system, diabetes, alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, all of those things contributing. And with transcendental meditation, because the stress level goes down, spontaneously people desire cigarettes less. Not because they have been told to give up smoking, but because when the body is more balanced, it desires a cigarette less. The same with alcohol. The same with any form of stress. That gets dissolved, and today our university has received over $25 million from the National Institutes of Health and other granting foundations of the American government to do research on transcendental meditation and prevention. Because clearly, the only solution to the healthcare crisis is prevention. And the transcendental meditation technique is that technique which prevents disease. So it's very, very practical. And when we get into the advanced techniques of transcendental meditation, then the benefits on health and the increase in the brain coherence becomes even greater. So once you've been meditating for 2 months, and the mind is used to that effortless settling down to that unified field of pure consciousness within, then you can learn advanced techniques. And they allow you to experience that transcending process so that you begin to refine the senses. begin to experience finer levels of consciousness. And then you can learn the TM City program, including yogic flying. And these techniques come from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And those techniques are supposed to be practiced from that most refined, unified level of consciousness. If you try to practice them from the surface level of consciousness, nothing happens. It's like trying to get energy out of this glass of water. If I rub the surface of the glass, nothing happens. But if I can learn how to function at the level of the molecule or the atom or the nucleus, I can get a huge amount of energy out of that glass. It's the same with the thinking process. Surface level of thinking, nothing happens. But at those finer and finer levels, and ultimately at that unified level, where all the laws of nature, including gravity, are found, then an impulse of consciousness from that fundamental level creates a huge response from the laws of nature. You can engage the total intelligence of nature from that finest level of thinking. And those Yoga Sutras of Patanjali are designed to engage the total creative potential of natural law. And what you see in the research is that the structure of the Yoga Sutras, 195 Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, is mirrored perfectly in the 195 gyri of the human brain. In fact, every structure in the unified field of consciousness is expressed in the human physiology, giving us that physical expression of totality. The human being is the most perfect creation in creation. It's a perfect expression of the totality of natural law. It's so perfect that it can give you as an individual the experience of everything. So it's that svest, right? It's that all that is. You get the experience that consciousness is all that there is. Perfect unity.
Kako je tih 195 sutri raspoređeno? 195 Patanjalijevih sutri ima analogiju u našem mozgu. Kako su one raspoređene?
Okay. Well, everyone in the West knows that the word yoga means union or unity. Think for a moment, what is it in the human physiology that creates unity? Now, it's obviously not your arm or your leg or your nose. You can analyze down what part of the physiology creates unity. At the moment, the viewers are seeing me, hearing me. They're getting visual information. Electrons are hitting the screen of the television, creating photons. Those photons go into the back of the retina, and then that creates electrical impulses that travel to the brain. They're also hearing me. That's a vibration of the tympanum, creating another electrical signal that goes to the brain. All these electrical signals get unified together into holistic experience by the cerebral cortex. So it's the cerebral cortex that creates unity of experience in the physiology. So let's look at that level of unity. What is the structure of the cerebral cortex? You find, actually, that in the frontal lobe of the brain, there are 51 gyri, which means folds. And in the parietal part of the brain and occipital part of the brain, there are 55 gyri in each. And in the temporal part of the brain, there are 34. If you add those together, you get 195. If you look at the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which are the sutras to create unity, you find there are 195 sutras. And what Dr. Tony Nader, who is a brilliant scientist from MIT, has found is there's a one-to-one correspondence between the structure of knowledge, as described in the ancient Vedic literature, which we now understand is the structure of consciousness, and the structure of the human physiology. The human physiology is made of consciousness. What we thought before was the human physiology was made of matter, just like we thought the universe was made of matter. But actually, the unified field is actually consciousness, as you say in the word consciousness here in Haravatska. Svest, which means everything is consciousness. All is consciousness. That's very profound knowledge. What we understand today is everything in the universe is actually consciousness. This glass is made of consciousness. Doesn't look like it's made of consciousness, but then it doesn't look like it's made of energy either, does it? So when you get to the finest levels of physics, nothing looks like matter. You can't say that the quantum level of physics looks like matter at all. An electron is everywhere in the universe. It's living in an unbounded, infinite dimensional complex Hilbert space. It has nothing to do with matter. Ultimately, consciousness is all that there is. Consciousness transforms itself and starts to look like matter. But actually, everyone and everything is consciousness. And even more fun than that, it's your own consciousness. There's only one consciousness in the whole universe. It's like the unified field.
Jedna jedina svijest i to baš moja. Baš sam sretan čovjek.
It's absolutely, we're all very lucky. How can that be, you might ask? Think of it this way. There's one unified field, and yet the unified field looks different everywhere. It's actually the same everywhere, but it looks different. It's like an ocean. You have all the different waves coming and going and coming and going, but there's only one ocean. The ocean is like the unified field. At the depth, it's completely silent and eternal. On the surface, it's always changing, just like the universe. On the surface, it's always changing. Underneath, it's universal and internal. Just like you. On the surface, you're always changing. You look different now than you did when you were 6 years old. You look different when you're 100 years old. But underneath, you're the same you. You're never changing.
Spomenuli ste kvantnu fiziku koja je, eto, najdublje otišla u sitnost i na neki način na ona mjesta gdje se prostor i vrijeme raspadaju i gdje se sve nalazi posvuda u isto vrijeme. Kakve pouke iz toga izvukla kvantna fizika? Što nam je ona dovela s obzirom da, eto, ona na neki način prepoznaje to polje, ali možda ne prepoznaje sve njegove karakteristike, ili gdje je neki komarić koji možda nedostaje?
The missing is a very profound question. Ultimately, the missing piece is this, that physicists were very surprised to find that the universe was quantum mechanical. They didn't expect it. Like in 1900, they thought they understood everything. It was all Newton's laws and Maxwell's laws of electromagnetism. Then Planck proposed the idea of the quantum. And by 1925, physicists were realizing they could only describe the atom realistically if nature was quantum mechanical. It was a huge surprise. And then as quantum field theory developed, physicists began to be able to describe the electrons and photons and all of the particles in nature in terms of waves of unbounded fields. But the big mystery is this from physics. Let's suppose I take an ocean and I leave it alone. What will it do? The answer is, won't do anything, because Newton's law says that any system stays the way it is unless something acts on it. All right? So if I leave an ocean on its own, nothing will happen. If you leave the unified field on its own, why doesn't nothing happen? In other words, why is there this whole universe? The unified field could just sit there forever and do nothing. What physicists do is they cheat. They put a little term into the equation to make the unified field interact with itself, to make it quantum mechanical. And then, from within itself, it can create the whole universe. But they don't understand why. They understand how, but they don't know why. Now, just do a simple thought experiment, as Einstein would do. Imagine that the unified field is actually consciousness. Now, if you took a field of consciousness and left it on its own, what would it do? Well, I'll give you a hint. Take a field of unconsciousness, and it won't do anything. But take a field of consciousness, and by definition, consciousness must be aware. That's what consciousness is, awareness. What is there for it to be aware of? There's only itself. By definition, consciousness is aware of itself. But if it's aware of itself, then it's the knower and the known and the process of knowing. Wow. You took one thing, now you've got three things. Knower, process of knowing, and known get created spontaneously within that structure of consciousness. Remember what I said at the beginning. Knower, process of knowing, and known, that's the fundamental of education. The three fundamental elements of education. But the known is also consciousness. So it can know the knower. Process of knowing is also consciousness. It can know the known. And so the whole thing starts to vibrate within itself. And then those fundamental vibrations come out as electrons, protons, DNA, human beings. But the whole point is that the unified field is actually consciousness. And just very recently, physicists have begun to realize that the fundamental dilemmas of quantum mechanics, with this relationship between the observer and the observed, they all become resolvable when you realize that the observer is the observed when you take it down to the unified level. Because at the unified level, there's only one thing. The observer and the observed are the same. So the student in the classroom is actually the knowledge that's being presented on that most fundamental level. The student is everything. I am that. Everything is that. Nothing is other than that field of consciousness.
Jedan hrvatski fizičar je u knjizi zapisao da su, putujući u dubinu prostora i vremena gdje sve nestaje, na kraju naišli na svoje vlastito lice koje je gledalo u njih iz dubine, pa je to dosta slikovit prikaz ovog što ste vi sad ispričali. Vi ste doktor fizike. Kako ste se susreli sa transcendentalnom meditacijom i u kojoj mjeri ste je mogli apsorbirati unutar svog znanja? Da li je bilo nekih prepreka ili je to jednostavno bio vama logični slijed?
Yes, I mean, the thing is, you can't have physics without a physicist. And you certainly can't have physics without a conscious physicist. So the whole point of physics is to understand the universe. And the more clear, more awake, more alert, more creative, more intelligent you are, the more chance you'll have of being able to fathom the structure of the universe. But you'll never be able to understand the function of the universe purely by looking on it as material. Ultimately, as you develop higher states of consciousness through transcendental meditation and its advanced techniques and yogic flying, not only do you become a better physicist in terms of becoming better at mathematics and memorization and insight, but you become a better physicist because you have the experience of the source of the universe that physicists study. You begin to understand, yes, the universe is an expression of my own consciousness. Then you start to feel at home with everyone and everything. You'll meet a lot of very miserable physicists because they get lost in the parts. If you spend your whole life studying the Higgs boson, you've given up infinity for a point particle. You need to have the ocean in your awareness while you're studying a wave. Otherwise, you'll be miserable. Think of the poor person who's being tossed around by a single wave. You need to have command of the whole ocean. So a physicist has to realize that their knowledge of physics is structured in their own consciousness. You have to have a fully developed consciousness in order to be a fully developed physicist.
U kojoj mjeri i koliko lako ili teško učenici prihvaćaju metode koje se uče recimo u vašoj srednjoj školi, znači tih 15 minuta meditacije, koliko im je to strano, koliko se lako u to prihvate, jer mogu zamisliti da bi u školama koje, ja znam, mnogi na to gledali sa upitnicima, čak i sa nekakvom vrstom sumnje, možda ne bi ni ozbiljno shvatili. Kakav je njihov odnos učenika s kojima vi radite?
The students love meditating. Because it gives them the experience of themselves.
I ne moraju ništa raditi.
Correct. I mean, it's effortless. And you don't do anything, but you experience everything. But what I found is, talking here in Hrvatska to students, they all want to learn meditation. Absolutely. As soon as I finish my lecture, the first question always is, please teach us how to do it. Immediately. And every student wants this. And I've noticed this now. I've been traveling throughout the Balkans. And I'm very pleased to tell you that in several countries now, we have agreements with schools and universities that starting in September, we'll have at least 100 to 1,000 students in each country meditating together in schools. And the great thing to know about this is that the unified field is a field. And therefore, everything is connected at that level. So if you have 4.2 million people in Hrvatska, and they're each practicing transcendental meditation and reducing their individual stress, then naturally there will be a reduction in acute social stress. And acute social stress manifests itself as things like crime, violence, dissatisfaction, lack of creativity, lack of entrepreneurship, divorce, cigarette consumption, alcohol consumption, sickness rates. All of those things can be put together by social scientists.
Možda bi trebalo spomenuti da su te stvari i eksperimentalno potvrđene.
Yes. That's right, because all of these elements can be put together by social scientists to form a measure of acute social stress. And what's been found is you don't actually need to have 4.2 million Hrvatis practicing transcendental meditation. Just 1% is enough to see a significant reduction in acute social stress. So let's say that would be 42,000. But the very, very good news is that when transcendental meditation is practiced in groups, together with the advanced techniques and the TM City program, including yogic flying, in groups, you only need the square root of 1%. So instead of needing 42,000, you need about 210, 220, something like that. So just any school, anywhere, putting this program in for the students twice a day would have a profound effect on reducing acute social stress in the whole country. What that means is that the country becomes less prone to violence within the country, negativity goes down, positive trends such as entrepreneurship and creativity and productivity go up, negative trends go down. But if you really want to make an impact, then create a group of 1,000. Just take one high school with 1,000 students. Put this program in. 1,000 is the square root of 1% of 100 million. That would reduce the stress in Serbia, Kosovo, Montenegro, Macedonia, Albania, Greece, Slovenia. You'd be able to decrease the stress level in the whole Balkans from here with just a group of 1,000 students practicing these techniques together.
Negdje 1993. 94. provedeni su takvi eksperimenti u Washingtonu i na Bliskom istoku. O njime govori John Hagelin i zapravo jedna poprilična količina debelih knjiga dokumentiraju da taj efekt koji se zove Maharišijev učinak zaista radi. No, za kraj emisije da ne zaboravimo upitati gdje se danas sve obrazovanje na temelju svijesti provodi, znači u koliko škola i u kojim tipovima škola, odnosno kad pričate recimo o zemljama Balkana, da li se tu radilo o srednjim školama, o fakultetima, privatnim školama i u kojoj mjeri uopće se to po svijetu širi po tipovima škola?
We're looking primarily here at every type of school and university. Could be private universities, public universities, private schools, public schools. So, for example, in the last 5 years, there have been over 100,000 students instructed in transcendental meditation in schools in Latin America. And the program has been so successful that the Minister of Education in Rio province in Brazil has just announced he wants 1 million students instructed in transcendental meditation right away. Schools now in America, private schools, public schools, charter schools, are introducing consciousness-based education. In Canada, in England, in Holland, in Africa, now in Uganda and Ghana and Kenya, in Australia, New Zealand, the Maori school has just started. Tremendous results, reducing violence and improving academic performance. In China now, there are 300 students practicing together in Beijing. In Ukraine, they're everywhere in the world basically now. Schools are implementing this program because everywhere in the world there's dissatisfaction with education. And school principals and university presidents can see immediately that the missing link is developing and unfolding the total creative potential of the student. That's what's missing. And when they add that, then everything they're doing starts to work. So it's very, very fortunate because the world is currently going through an unprecedented transition from violence and war and disease and poverty to peace and harmony and prosperity. And you're seeing it right now. Now think for a moment. When Maharishi began to teach transcendental meditation in 1959, just think what the world was like. In 1959, I couldn't be here talking to you. I wouldn't have got into the country. Europe, think of Europe, the history of Europe. How has that changed since 1959? It's amazing how that level of unity value has risen. In 1959, you couldn't drive from northern Sweden to Sicily without a passport. It would have been unthinkable. In a couple of years, you'll be able to drive from Zagreb to northern Sweden to Sicily.
Nadam se da ću ipak letjeti, a ne voziti.
That'll happen. You'll be able to go. What I'm saying is that this level of unity and harmony is rising in the world in an unprecedented way.
Oni koji žele tome pridonijeti mogu otići na stranicu www.tm/savez.hr gdje ima ponešto o transcendentalnoj meditaciji. U međuvremenu ćemo mi završiti emisiju. Hvala vam, gospodine Dins. Hvala i vama na pažnji. Evo, do sad smo se susreli već s toliko nevjerojatnim sposobnostima naše svijesti koje smo uvijek vidjeli kao odvojene fenomene od placeba do remote viewinga. No, evo, zašto njene mogućnosti koristiti samo u postizanje takvih ekstremnih postignuća kad je ona uvijek s nama, ona je mi. Kada mi učimo, zašto se ne bismo prisjetili da uči i svijest za koju neki onako kažu da već sve zna, uroniti u taj bunar svakako se može pokazati dobrim alatom, pogotovo kad se ima u vidu da je upravo obrazovanje onaj ključni proces u kojem se oblikuju stavovi o svijetu oko nas. Čim su oni širi, širi je i bolji svijet u kojem živimo. Doviđenja.